Welcome to part 3 of the new user training series. This data entry demonstration video is for our CoC and ESG funded projects, including emergency shelter, transitional housing, permanent housing, rapid rehousing, and homelessness prevention. As we reviewed in awards navigation to process and admission, we are going to go into the intake admission module. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to select the program in which we are entering the client. I am going to enter our first client into the individual emergency shelter program. And now I have a couple of options. I can, number one, search for existing referrals using identifying information, or I can search based on a screening date range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter a client's first and last initials, AB. I want to see if this client's ever been in my program before. And if I had any clients enrolled in this program with the initials AB, they would display on a list on this page. However, there are no clients currently or formally enrolled in this program with those initials, so I'm going to click on Create New Application. And the admission form opens for us. So now we just have to go through and we have to fill in all of the required universal and program-specific data elements that we reviewed in the prior training. So I'm going to select our project start date. I'm going to enter this client into a shelter bed. Now, client location, for me, this is staying blank. This is a training program, so it's been set to not be assigned to any specific continuum of care. For residential projects, the bed that you select in the client location field, it will automatically show which continuum of care that bed is associated with. For permanent or for homelessness prevention, you won't see this shelter bed drop down. You're going to see a client location drop down. If your program is only set to serve clients in one continuum of care, that's going to be the only CoC that's available on that drop-down list for you. If you serve clients in more than one continuum of care, you're going to select the continuum of care which that client is located. Next, we're going to enter some basic demographic information. Bedelia. So we've got Amelia Bedelia. We put in her first name and last name. We now have to follow that up with that data quality information that we reviewed in the previous video. And we have to enter her social security number. Now, if a client does not know their social security number or they refuse to give you their social security number in this field, you would have to enter all nines. Anything other than all nines will register within the database on the back end as either a real or a partial social security number. So if you cannot get that information, it's going to be all nines. If you can only get the last 4 digits from the client, you're going to enter the first 5 as nines, and then you're going to put the last 4 numbers of their social security number after that, and follow up with the appropriate data quality selection. We're going to select our client's gender, and then we're going to enter their date of birth. Following that up with the data quality. we're going to select one of the two options for ethnicity. And then we're going to move into race. And like we discussed in the prior video, if a client identifies as more than one race, you can select all of the races in which the client does identify. Next, we have the street address section. For our residential projects, the street address section, it's not really useful since you've already selected above the bed that the client was being placed in. However, for homelessness prevention, if you're interested in keeping track of the physical address as to where the client is living, you can enter that information into this field. However, it's not a requirement. This is a section we do not have any control over when we configure data elements, so we cannot collapse this section. It's always going to appear. However, it's not required, so nothing has to be filled out in these fields in order to process the page. Because I entered a date of birth that makes this client over the age of 18, I need to answer whether or not they're a veteran. Now we move on to the living situation section. So the first data element that is asked is type of residence. So prior to coming into our program today, where did you sleep last night? And these break out into 4 sections of options. We have our homeless situations, our institutional situations, our transitional and permanent housing situations, and then our unknown options. So our client let us know that last night they slept in a place not meant for habitation. So whether they slept in their car, they slept in a train station, or they slept in the woods, that would fall under this type of residence. Length of stay in previous place. So while you were in this place not meant for habitation, how long were you there for? And we need to select one of the response options available to us. So we're going to say that they've been there for more than 1 month but less than 90 days. And now we have to enter the approximate date that this episode of homelessness started. So you can either type the date in, or if you do not have backdating permissions, you will see a calendar date picker icon right here. So I'm going to go back 2 months, and I'm going to select November 29th is when this episode of homelessness began. Regardless of where they stayed last night, number of times the client has been on the streets, in emergency shelter, or safe haven in the past 3 years, including today. And in the prior video, we talked about meeting the criteria for chronic homelessness. This is where we're going to answer. So is this the first time within the last 3 years they've been homeless? Is this the second time? Is it the third time? Are we at 4 or more episodes of homelessness? So I'm going to answer 4 or more. And now we have to ask our client, what is the total number of months that you have spent homeless on the street, in emergency shelter, or safe haven in the past 3 years? So we're asking them to look back over the last 3 years, and they've been homeless. Let's say they've had 5 episodes of homelessness over the last 3 years. We're going to ask them to look back and say, okay, that first time you were homeless, how many months were you homeless for? And let's say they say 4. And then we're going to say the second time that you were homeless, how many months were you homeless for that time? And let's say they say 1. So now we've got 5 months of homelessness, your 3rd episode of homelessness, your 4th episode of homelessness, and then, this episode of homelessness. So they tell us they've been homeless, 4 months, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and now we're at 2 months. So from this selection of response options, we're going to select the answer that they gave us. Anything more than 12 months is just going to be a selection of more than 12 months. Chronically homeless is a field that auto-calculates based on the responses to the answers in this living situation section, and as we move on, based on whether or not our client has a disabling condition. So now we're going to move into the income, non-cash benefit, and health insurance information. Remember, if we are talking about a household with children, income information and non-cash benefit information is not required to be asked of children. So if those children have any sort of income coming in, that has to be recorded in the head of household's admission record. So just something to keep in mind. So it's simply yes or no. Does this client have income from any source coming in? If we answer yes, now the monthly income sources section becomes required, and we have to select the type of income that they have and the amount of that income. So let's say they get $658 from SSI, and they currently are getting $327 in general public assistance. The monthly income amount is going to do all of the math for us and give us their total monthly income based on what we typed in for the amounts. Non-cash benefits and health insurance work the exact same way. If you answer yes, that they do have either health insurance or non-cash benefits from any source, you have to select the type of non-cash benefits and health insurance that they have. I apologize, my computer's moving a little slow right now. So now once I say yes that they have health insurance, I have to select the type of health insurance that they have. I only have to select the type of health insurance that they have. I do not have to answer no for the rest of the types of health insurance. You just have to indicate which one is a yes. And now we are in the special needs section. These are the disability elements. These are the elements that are going to determine whether or not our client has a disabling condition. Now, this specific project has been set up so that not all of the special needs questions are required. If your program does not collect the special needs data elements, or some are required but some aren't required, or none of them are required, instead of disabling condition being a simple yes, or instead of disabling condition auto-calculating for us, it becomes a field where you have to select whether or not the client has a disabling condition. So our list of disability elements is physical disability, developmental disability, chronic health condition, HIV or AIDS, mental health problem, or substance abuse. You can see next to each question there is a follow-up question. However, none of them have that red asterisk next to them. So I'm going to say that our client does not have a physical disability. Our client does not have a developmental disability, but our client does have a chronic health condition. So I'm going to select yes. As soon as I answer yes, the follow-up question, is this expected to be of long continued and indefinite duration and substantially impairs their ability to live independently, now becomes required. And I have to answer yes or no. So, did this chronic health condition in any way, shape, or form played into um, any of their episodes of homelessness, or could this chronic health condition be something that needs to be taken into consideration when looking for housing? And that is yes or no. So I'm going to say no. Our client has asthma. It's a chronic health condition. However, it's not any reason as to why they've been homeless before or could potentially become homeless again. Next is HIV or AIDS. This is a very sensitive question. The way I've always approached it with clients is asking whether, not coming out and asking, do you have HIV or AIDS? And so what I would say was, have you ever been diagnosed with either HIV or AIDS? And if they say no, they've never been diagnosed with it, well, then it's a no. Um, and sometimes just changing the wording of how you phrase the question um, makes them more comfortable with answering it. So everybody has their own way of doing everything actually. But that's just something that I found was helpful when I was on your side of things. For mental health problem, my client says yes, they do have a mental health problem. Now I have to again answer that follow-up question. So is this mental health problem so severe that it did contribute to any of our clients' episodes of homelessness in the past? And is this mental health problem severe enough that it needs to be taken into consideration when looking for housing in the future? And I'm going to say yes, our client has a persistent and severe mental health problem. And now we're going to move on to substance abuse. Substance abuse does not break out as just yes or no. Substance abuse breaks out into alcohol abuse, drug abuse, both alcohol and drug abuse. So if your client says yes, that they do have substance abuse issues, you need to then ask which type. Is it alcohol, drugs, or is it both? And our client says no, they do not have a substance abuse issue at all. If all of these disability element special needs questions were required, disabling condition would auto-calculate to yes in this situation, and that is because yes was answered to one of the special needs, and yes was also answered in that it has contributed to homelessness in the past and is something that needs to be considered when looking for housing in the future. So because I see a yes with a yes follow-up, I can select that yes, our client has a disabling condition. If mental health problems said no, and all we had was our client had a chronic health condition, and it said yes for a chronic health condition, but it said no for the follow-up question, then we would select no, our client does not have a disabling condition. What triggers the system to auto-calculate for us whether or not our client has a disabling condition is that the follow-up question has been answered as yes. So I'm going to select that yes, our client does have a disabling condition. So if I scroll back up to the page to the living situation section, chronically homeless is now auto-calculated as yes. Our client has been homeless 4 or more times in the last 3 years. That total equals 12 months or more, and our client has a disabling condition. So they have met the criteria for chronic homelessness. After the disabling element or the disability elements, we're going to answer whether or not our client has ever been a victim of domestic violence. The information date here is going to pre-populate for us with the client's admission date because that's the date that we got this information. If we answer yes, our client is a victim or survivor of domestic violence, some extra questions appear, and they appear as required, so we do have to answer them. The first one being, when did this experience occur? And we have within the past 3 months, 3 to 6 months ago, from 6 to 12 months ago, more than a year ago. So we're going to select the response from that drop down, and then we're going to ask our client whether or not they are currently fleeing domestic violence. And that's yes or no. Household composition fields, these are all auto-calculated by awards based on whether or not we admit any additional household members after. So all this is going to auto-calculate for us. We don't have to worry about this at all. The same with the family details. The next required data element is the zip code of last permanent address. So by permanent address, we mean the last place they lived long enough to receive mail that was not incarceration. So you just need to have them think back. Where was the last place they lived that they got mail? If they can tell you it was in East Greenbush, but they don't know the zip code for East Greenbush, Awards has a zip code lookup right here. And if you click on that in a separate tab, it brings you to the post office website where you can look up a zip code. So you could enter, let's say, East Greenbush, select the state, and this is in New York. And then click on Find, and it will give you the zip code, 12061. So then we can go back into their admission record, 12601. I already kind of forgot it. After you enter the zip code data quality, date that they left the last permanent address, those are not required data elements. We don't look at them for any reason. They are not used in any reporting, so those can be left blank. You then move on to the services sought section. Depending on your program, your services sought section may look different. You could have health insurance related options here. You could have referral information, response options here. They may be required, they may not be required. So when you log in, take a look through, see what your services sought section looks like. If you have any questions about it, you can ask your program director. If your program director is not available to answer the questions in the services sought section for you, you can always give me a call and I can help you out with that. Once you've entered all of the information, you're then going to, for our residential programs, this button is going to say housing admission. For homelessness prevention, it's going to say process admission, but they're both the same thing. So we're going to click on housing admission. Now, because I'm not a creative person and I use this date of birth and I use this social security number a lot, awards is saying, or that is asking me, am I sure that this is the correct spelling of my client's name? Is this the correct date of birth, and is this the correct social security number? And the reason that it's asking me that is because somewhere within one of the programs that I have chart access to, there is already a client that has this same date of birth and the same social security number. So they just want to double check with me to make sure that this is all correct so that I'm not creating a duplicate record for a client. So I'm going to say, yes, I am sure everything's correct. And then I am brought to the data sharing consent page. And I apologize. Again, I'm creating this video from home and now my cats are fighting behind me. So before you got to hear my dog bark at nothing, and now my cats feel the need to beat each other up right behind my head. So this is the form within awards that has to match the paper release of information that is on the back of the intake packet. So this program is set up to participate in data sharing. So my client says that they're going to set their selection to A. They just want to share their name, gender, program enrollment, and exit dates. No social security number, no date of birth, no race information, nothing. If you look them up in Consumer Lookup, you are literally seeing their name, gender enrollments, and then or gender and then any program enrollments. Once you select, if you select option A, there's the restriction disclaimer. It says, please check here if you choose option A. I understand that choosing option A means data elements from intake admission will not be shared with other agencies. So you're going to check that box. Now, the date that this is signed / not signed defaults to the date that the data entry is being completed, not the date that the client actually signed the form if those 2 days aren't the same day. So all you need to do here is just, mine doesn't want to load, so I'm just going to type it in, is just enter the client's admission date as the date signed and click on continue. And it's now going to display in report mode, meaning you can't edit it at all. But what this does is it allows you to print it if that's something that you want to do by clicking on the CARES icon. It's going to bring up, a print preview if it ever loads, and you can then print it. And when it prints with a client signature line, so that if you want to have the client sign that as well as kind of another indication that you selected this option for data sharing, and that it's the same selection we made within the database, and then the client can sign that. If you don't want to print it out, just click on continue to bring you to the next page. This is the page where 99% of relationship to head of household error occurs. Relationship to head of household is a universal data element. That means it has to be completed, but it has to be completed correctly, or else it is going to display as missing or null data on reports. So when we're processing an admission for a client, the first time they come into our program, we have two options. Number one, we can create a new household for them, or number two, we can join them to an already existing household. And now this is where a lot of the confusion comes in, is because we're talking about household composition, but we're saying create a new household, join an existing household, and then we have admission date and household start date and residential move-in date. We've got all these dates flying around at us. The first time a client comes into our program, 99.97% of the time, they're coming in brand new. They're not attached to a client that is already in our program. They're not attached to any one person. We don't have to link them to anyone else. They're coming in brand new. So we need to give them a household start date. The household start date is the date in which all of these people or single person is linked to the head of household. So what Awards has done is it defaults to create a new household. And if we're creating a new household, because the household start date and admission date must be the same date in order to not get relationship to head of household errors, it gives us the option now, right under admission date, to not type in a household start date, not select it from the calendar icon, to just click to insert below. It's automatically going to put their admission date into the household start date field, and then we click continue. And now our client is admitted into the program. They now have a household ID, and they're the self. They are the head of household. We're now asked, do we want to add another member to this household? Right now, I'm going to say no, because I want to show you a couple other things, but we are going to get back to this where you'll see how to admit a household with adults and children. So I'm going to say no, I don't want to add anybody else to this household, and I'm going to click on continue. Once I click on continue, I am now on this confirmation page. It has a green check mark indicating this client is currently admitted. This is the page that you want to get to know that everything has been completed. So just keep that in mind. If you then at that point aren't sure if maybe you selected the right response option for one of the data elements, if you click on this green check mark, it's going to open their admission record back up, at which point you can make any adjustments that you need to make. Everything within a client's record within awards, you as a user are able to update and correct that information with the exception of admission date. A client's admission date cannot be updated or changed by the user. That is something that would require a help desk ticket if you put in the wrong admission date. So just keep that in mind. You have the ability to come back in and update their admission record at any time or correct it. You don't need to ask us to do that for you. Everything you can correct on your own with the exception of admission date. That's something only we can do on the back end. I'm going to go back to the home screen. So that's how you process an individual client into a residential project. I'm going to go through, I want to go through processing a family admission into a residential project, and then the other type of admission I want to go through with you guys is a readmission, because we know that that happens. So for the rest of this training video, what we're going to do is I'm going to admit a parent and child household, and then we're going to record some services for our clients. I'm going to show you how to process an annual assessment, and then we're going to discharge a client, and I'm going to show you how you can readmit them if they come back. So I'm going to go back into our intake admission module. I'm going to change my program from emergency shelter to CoC permanent housing. And I'm just going to click on continue, because I want to show you that if you don't enter any information into these identifying information fields, it's going to automatically search for the last 6 months of admissions instead. So I'm going to click on continue, and now we can see these are all the clients that are in my program who have been admitted within the last 6 months. I'm going to admit a brand new client. So I'm going to say that I'm really, really behind on data entry, and I'm way outside of my 10-day required timeliness. So I'm going to say that this client came in on January 2nd. And I'm going to put in their name. I'm going to follow that up with the data quality, social security number, and their gender. Date of birth. I'm going to fill in all of the required data elements for this client. And like I said, my computer's moving a little slow right now, so I'm kind of clicking faster than the screen can keep up. We're going to say no, that they're not a veteran. And for type of residence, we are going to say that they're coming in from a shelter and they've been there for more than 90 days. And when I select the date that this episode of homelessness began, I'm going to go back to August. we're going to say this is the first time that they've been homeless, and we're going to give them 5 months. Now, because this is a permanent housing project, this also is true for rapid rehousing. We have to answer whether or not the client has been placed into permanent housing. So I've already accepted the client into this program with the goal of securing housing. So yes, they are enrolled in my program. We're working on finding them a place to live, but as of right now, they're not in permanent housing yet. They're still at the shelter. So I'm going to select no for has the client been placed into permanent housing. And you'll notice that up here at the top where we selected a bed for our client in the emergency shelter, but yet this is still a housing program, a residential program, but we're not selecting a bed for them. We're not selecting a residence unit for this client yet because they haven't been placed into permanent housing yet. So unless and until the client secures housing, we're not going to put them into a bed. And now we're going to answer the income questions. Non-cash and health insurance. We're going to answer the special needs. And we're going to say yes. So now you can see how disabling condition auto calculates for us. We're going to answer whether or not this client's ever been a victim of domestic violence. And we're going to enter the zip code of their last permanent address. And now we're going to click on process admission. And I'm going to get this same, hey, are you sure message again, like I said, because I'm always using the same combination of birth dates and social security numbers. So I'm going to say yes, I'm sure everything is correct. And I'm going to get brought to the data sharing consent page. And that's, again, this program is set up to participate in data sharing. However, my client does not want to have their data shared. So I'm going to select no, and I'm going to click on continue, and it's going to display in report mode so that I can print it if I want to. And now we're brought to the household composition page. Again, this is the first time this client has been enrolled into our program. So I want to create a new household for them, but admission date and household start date have to match so that we don't get any error messages when it comes to relationship to head of household. So I'm just going to click to insert the admission date into the household start date field, and I'm going to click on continue. Again, I'm asked, would you like to answer, or would you like to add another member to this household? Yes, I would like to add another member to this household. So I'm going to click on yes, and I'm going to click on continue. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to search and see if this additional household member has a record anywhere in the database that I have access to. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to search, and I'm going to put in their first name, last name, and social security number. Now, if there was a Milo Cat Jr. enrolled anywhere within a program that I have access to in the database, their name would show up on a list right here. But because there is not one, I'm going to select new record. And now I have to enter their date of birth, select their gender, and now I have to select the relationship to primary client. So who is Milo Cat Jr. in relation to Milo Cat? Milo Cat Jr. is Milo Cat's son. And now I'm going to enter his household start date as well. So I'm going to put the same date as his father's because they came into the program together. I'm going to click on continue. And now it's going to ask if I would like to admit Milo Cat Jr. into this program. Now, the reality of this situation is I'm not going to really be working and providing any services to this child. However, they are living in a unit that our program is paying for. And like I said in the previous training video, we can only report out on the information that's put in. So if I do not process an admission for the child, I'm not able to report out on household composition information correctly. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to process the child's admission. So now the admission record is going to open up for this child. We're going to enter their project start date, and now name, social security number, date of birth, gender, all of that's going to pre-populate for us because we've already entered that information on the previous screens. So we're just going to follow up with the data quality for that information. We're going to select our client's race and ethnicity. Now you'll see the living information or living situation information is missing. The veteran status information is missing. Income information, non-cash benefits information, none of that is asked of the children in the household. So we just have to answer whether or not that has this child been placed into permanent housing, and just like his dad, the answer is no. Are they covered by health insurance? We're going to say yes. And this child, we're going to select employer provided health insurance because he's covered by his dad, who is covered through his employer. The disability elements, special needs, they are required of all household members, and that's because disabling condition is required of all household members. Especially with larger families, this can kind of seem to be a daunting task, getting all of this information from the parent about the children. Number one, documentation or proof of for any of this information that's being entered into the database is not required. It is all self-reported. So it's not like we have to request documentation for HMIS purposes as to what, if any, special needs the children have or do not have. Again, with kind of how wording can help with how the questions are answered is I found that if you say, does your child have a physical disability, a developmental disability, chronic health condition, HIV/AIDS, mental health problems, substance abuse, at any one of those questions, they could easily say, I don't know. Does your child have a chronic health condition? I don't know. Because maybe their child's never actually been diagnosed with one. So they don't know that. But if you say, has your child ever been diagnosed with a physical disability? That makes it much more of a yes or no. Has the doctor said they have this or they don't? The reality of this situation is that really the majority of the kids in program, the answer is no for all of them. So just, fill it out as appropriate. Now, this household information is pre-populating for us. Domestic violence is not a question that's asked of minor children. It's a zip code of last permanent address. So all we have to do now is process the admission for this child. I'm going to answer that question, and we're going to say that dad also does not want to have his child's data shared. And I'm going to change this to their admission date, continue, and continue. So now we see we have father and son are in the program. Do I want to add another member? I'm going to say no, and I'm going to click on continue. They both have check marks. They've both been admitted. Everything is great. So that's how you process an admission for a brand new individual as well as a brand new household with adults and children. What we're going to do now, I'm going to jump back to the home page, and we're going to go into the charts section, and we are going to record. I want to show you how you can record services. So the first thing you want to do is you want to select the program of the client that you want to record this information for. So I'm going to go into our individual emergency shelter, and I'm going to go click on services individual, and now I have a drop down of all the different types of activities that can be performed within this services section. Right now, I want to write a progress note for this client. So I'm going to click on progress notes. And now I'm brought to progress notes data entry. I need to select the consumer that I want to write a progress note for. So I'm going to choose artichoke. I'm going to click on continue. My permissions are set the way most users' permissions are set, that I can only see the last 10 days worth of progress notes. It doesn't matter who wrote them, but I can only see the last 10 days. If for whatever reason I need to go back further than the 10 days to enter a note, I need to send in a help desk ticket requesting backdating permission. The help desk ticket just needs to say, can I have backdating permissions? We don't need to know which client, we don't need to know which program, because that permission is set at the user level, so backdating permission will take effect for every single program that you have access to within awards. When you are given backdating permission, which will let you view, edit, and write notes further back than this 10 days, that permission only lasts for 5 days. So you have 5 days from the date that we set that backdating for you to get caught up on the data entry in terms of progress notes and services. If it's not completed within those 5 days, you'll simply ask us for backdating permission again. So there's been no progress notes recorded for this client within the last 10 days, and I need to write a new progress note. The radio button is next to new note, so I'm going to click continue, and I'm going to enter, it shows only the last 10 days here, so I'm going to say enter a note that occurred on January 14th. I'm going to enter the time that I met with the client, and I'm going to enter the duration, how long I met with the client. And I'm going to just click on continue, and now a text box opens up where I can write a progress note. So this is a note. Right here it says you can check this box to lock this progress note to prevent for future edits or deletions. Unless you're directed by your supervisor to lock your progress notes, do not select this option, because this it locks your progress note and you are not able to edit it if you need to without contacting the help desk. So unless your supervisor says locking progress notes is something that I want you to do, don't select this option. Just click on Save Note, and you're now brought back to the editing index page, and you can now see the January 14th note appear on this list. You can click on the radio button next to the note as long as it is a note that you wrote. You can click on the radio button next to it, click on continue. If you need to change the date, you can change the date. If you need to change the time or the duration, you can do that. And if you click continue again, the progress note opens up and you can edit it if you need to. If you forgot to add something, you can make those edits and then save the note. That feature is only available if you wrote the note yourself. If it was a coworker that wrote the note, you would not be able to select this radio button. You would only be able to click on it as a hyperlink to open up in report mode so that you could print it out for the client's file if you want to. I'm going to go back to the home screen and into charts. I'm going to change my program to CoC permanent housing. I'm going to go back into individual services, and now we're going to fill out a contact log. Most of our users that record progress notes or contacts or services within awards do so through the contacts log. So you will click on contacts log, and it's going to open up the same first couple pages, same way as progress notes. We have our list of current clients. These are all the clients that are currently enrolled in the program. But let's say that we discharged a client, but we forgot to write a note or record the services that we provided, 3 days before we discharged the client. Once you discharge a client, you can still edit any of their records within the database simply by clicking on roster archives within that module, and the page refreshes, and we now have our list of clients that have been discharged. So if you don't have to undo a discharge, you don't have to ask the help desk for any assistance. You just simply have to click on roster archives, and it will open up the list of all the clients that have since been discharged. I'm going to use the jump back feature to go back because I'm going to go back into contact logs because I don't want to write a note right now for any of my discharged clients. So I'm going to select avocado. I'm going to click on continue. And now contacts in this program, it's set to the last 45 days. So if any notes had been written within the last 45 days, they would display as a list right here. But there hasn't been because we're really behind on data entry. So I'm going to click on continue, and I am going to select a date that I had contact with this client. I'm going to enter the time and the duration. Now we have our supportive services checklist. This is a list of all the services we could have provided to the client, and it's literally a checklist. Any services that you provided to that client when you met with them, you just check them off. So let's say we talked about education. They received a food bag. And then we talked about parenting training and socialization. These are all things that we talked about. I'm just going to check them all off. That's our first column. The second column, the second, third, fourth, and really fifth column, unless your program director tells you that you guys use this feature for billing purposes, you do not have to fill out the unit, cost, service detail, or funding source columns. You only need to fill those out if your program director informs you that you guys are using this for billing purposes. Otherwise, you're just going to select the services that were provided and then enter the note. Now, because I do not have backdating permissions set up, I have an error message that says you cannot write a progress note for the selected date without having the backdated progress notes data entry permission. So if that was the case, I would submit a help desk ticket and I would ask for backdating. But I'm just going to go back a few days. And so these are the services that we provided. And now we have the text box to enter the progress note associated with it. There's this nice little spell check feature that you can, this is so fun actually, you know, because I always make the H capital when I write this and the, it can correct that. Or you could just click on continue and it's going to save that for us. So it's really just like progress notes with the addition of being able to record all the services that were provided. Not all of our agencies utilize this feature, so just follow up with your program director and ask them if recording progress notes or services is something that you guys do. I'm going to go back to our home screen. It's going to default to the census module. And now I'm going to click on profile because I want to record an annual assessment for one of my clients. So I want to record an assessment for one of my clients that is in permanent housing. So I'm going to click on face sheet. The client's face sheet is the section within awards where the annual assessment is completed. So I'm going to select my consumer. I'm going to select page turner and click continue. And this is what the face sheet looks like. The face sheet is broken down into kind of demographic information and then HMIS info. The HMIS info section is the section of the face sheet that has to be updated in order for a client to be counted as having an annual assessment. It's done in the HMIS info section of the client's face sheet. So what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down to the bottom of the HMIS info section and you're going to click on update HMIS info. Now, this client's not due for an annual assessment yet because they've only been in the program since July. But we're going to say that our client, so they came into program in July and in September, we found housing for them. So the reason you're seeing right now, has client been placed into permanent housing, is empty, is blank, is because when this client was admitted, that wasn't a data element. So it wasn't there. So it's blank, really. So what we're going to do is, so our client came in July. So let's go, we're going to select September 21st. Now, under the annual update, it says this client is not yet required to complete an annual update. So this is just going to be a general update for our client. And this is where we're going to record for our permanent housing projects. Once we secure housing for them, we're going to come into this HMIS info section of their face sheet and we're going to change, has client been placed into permanent housing, from a no to yes. And once we change it to yes, we need to enter the date. So I'm going to say 9/21/17. Now, for new clients that came into the program after October 1st, where did it all go? That was so weird. For new clients that came in after October 1st, they will have to, that's where they'll select the residence unit information from. But because this client came in before, let's just open this back up. Because this client came in before, the residence unit information is already showing because the client was placed into the bed, when they were first enrolled in the program. If anything changes in their income information, you can update that here. Same with non-cash benefits and health insurance. And then you click update and that information saves. So that's really all there is to doing an update for a client. If I go into back to home and into profile and into this permanent housing program, let's select Hairy Feet. And this client has been placed into permanent housing. So if we click update HMIS info and give them an effective date, has client been placed into permanent housing? We're going to say yes for 12/20/17. The page refreshes a little bit. Not sure why it's giving me that message and trying to save it, but we're then going to select the residence unit for the client and click on update. And that's all you do when a client does secure permanent housing. You go into their face sheet and you update that information there. The one thing to keep in mind is that if this is a household with adults and children, that you do the same thing for all of the household members, and that you're changing it from a no to a yes for all the additional household members in addition to the head of household. So I'm going to go back to our home page, and I'm going to show you how we discharge a client. So in the census activities, to discharge a client, we're going to click on discharge. I'm going to discharge a client from our emergency shelter. I'm going to click on process discharge, and now I have two options. I can discharge somebody from my current program roster, or I can open up the discharge record of an already discharged client if I need to edit it or if I want to print it, things like that. Right now, I'm going to select to discharge a client off the current program roster. These are my current clients, so I'm going to select the client that I'm going to discharge and click continue, and the discharge form opens. So I'm going to, let's see, we're going to say that they left on the 20th. And now, if there was any change to their income during their stay, you can update their income information, their non-cash benefits information, their health insurance information, if it changed at all. We have to select the new destination. This is that list that I was talking about during the other training, that 99.99999% of where it is that a client is going to stay once being discharged will closely match all of these options on this response list. So you need to select the response that most closely matches where they're actually going. So we're going to say that this client said that they were going to move in with their girlfriend. And that's all they said. I'm moving in with my girlfriend. We're going to select that they're going to go stay or live with friends for permanently. They didn't say to us, I'm going to live with my girlfriend for the next 2 months until I can get my own apartment. All they said was, I'm going to live with my girlfriend. So we're going to choose that, we're going to select that that's where they're going permanently rather than that's where they're going temporarily. And we need to select the county in which they're going to. We then have the options to write all kinds of different discharge notes. So you can fill those out if that's something that your program does. And then we click apply. When processing a discharge for an individual, it's going to immediately display in report mode that you can print if you want to. And I just selected to return to the discharge menu. So that's how you discharge an individual client. When we're discharging a household, so I'm going to go into our permanent housing program. I'm going to go to our current program roster, and I'm going to select, let's see who, we're going to discharge the Milos. So let's say I click on Milo Cat and I click on continue. The awards database is not going to allow me to discharge the head of household without either discharging the rest of the household with him or discharging him but selecting another household member to become the head of household. So what we're going to do is we're going to discharge the household members along with the primary client, along with the head of household. We're going to click on continue, but we're going to get another kind of safeguard, and it's going to say, okay, so you're going to discharge everybody, but we're going to have you discharge process the child's discharge first before you can discharge the head of households. And that comes from a request that we put into Foothold, because what we were finding was we ran a couple reports back when I first started at CARES, and we found that we had all of these infants living in permanent supported housing by themselves. And it turned out that because we used to have the ability to, there were no safeguards, so you could just discharge the head of household. And because we only worked with the head of household, right, it didn't always register in our minds that we needed to discharge the children too. So when I started at CARES and we started running some reports, we noticed all of these children living by themselves. So Foothold put in these safeguards for us. So you're going to select the radio button next to the additional household member's name, and you're going to click on continue. Excuse me, sorry about that. And just like we did on the individual's discharge form, it's going to be the same thing. We're going to enter the client's discharge date, and we're going to enter the destination where they're going. So let's say Dad found an apartment and with no other housing subsidy. He found an apartment that he can afford on his own. So that's where they're going to live. And they found that apartment in Albany County. I'm going to click on apply. And now I can select the radio button next to Dad's name and process his discharge. Awards is going to assume that because you're choosing to process the discharge for the entire household, that they are all going to the same place. So discharge date is going to pre-populate for us. So is destination, so is new residence county. If they are not going to the same place, you would just select a new destination on the head of household's discharge form. So I'm going to click apply, and now there's green check marks next to both names that say discharged. If you want to print their discharge records, you can simply click on that green arrow, scroll to the bottom, and click on printable form. And now it displays in report mode and you can print it. I'm going to jump back to this screen where they have their check marks. Now, let's say that you just processed these discharges and then realized you selected the wrong family. So you just discharged clients who really weren't discharged from your program. What you do, you can open up their discharge record just by clicking on that check mark. And now, because nobody has been put in, well, these clients hadn't achieved. They did, actually. I'm sorry, I take that back. Because nobody has since had an admission processed into the residence unit that this client was in, I can simply click to undo his discharge, and he will automatically be placed back on the current roster list. If somebody has been put into the client's bed since this discharge was processed, this undo discharge button will not display. And at that point, you can submit a help desk ticket and say, I need to undo this discharge, but I've already put somebody else in the bed. And on the back end, we'll do some shifting around so that that discharge, can be undone. So now that we've admitted clients, we've recorded services for clients, we've updated information, and we've discharged clients. Let's say a client is discharged and then comes back. In the intake admission module and selecting the program, I'm just going to click on continue because I just want, to look at the last couple months of clients. So if I click on this discharge date column heading, just so I can see who I've had in and out. Okay, so let's say Amelia Bedelia. So she left on the 20th. She stayed with us for one night. And then she left. And now today is the 22nd, 21st. And she's come back. So I'm going to click on her name, and I have two options. I can just edit the demographic fields of this record, or I can create a new intake record and readmit her into the program. I want to readmit her, so I'm going to select Create New Intake Record and readmit her into the program and click Continue. What this is going to do is it's going to open up her admission form from her most recent stay with us. So now I just need to select her new intake project start date. I need to select a shelter bed. Just confirm all of this information is still the same. Now, because it's only been 2 days since the last time she stayed with us, this information might change in terms of the type of residence before coming back. This is what you really need to make sure that we update this information. So when she left, she was going to stay with family. So she's coming back to the shelter from staying or living in a family's apartment, family member's room, apartment, or house. And she was there 2 to 6 nights. Now, let's see. Now, because she stayed for less than 7 days, it does not constitute as a break in homelessness. So we can still keep this approximate date that homelessness started the same. And 4 more times and more than 12 months, can't really go any higher than that. So, ask about insurance information, non-cash benefits, health insurance, income, ask about the special needs, and then click on housing admission. And again, confirming that this is the correct person. One thing to really keep in mind is that living situation section. Every time a client is readmitted into a program, we have to update that information. Again, we can only report out on what is put in. So if a client over the years is on his 37th stay in the shelter over the last, 10 years, excuse me, but yet we've never updated that living situation section, it's never gonna say that this client meets the criteria for chronic homelessness, because it might still say he's on his first episode of homelessness. So we really need to be mindful that we're readmitting the client, and yes, it's great that all of this information is already coming over for us so that it's less data entry. But we have to be mindful that we are updating the information if it has changed. Every time a client comes in, they do have to select whether or not they want to share their data if the program participates in data sharing. I click on continue. In report mode, click on continue. Now, this client has already been assigned to a household from the last time they were with us. So, instead of asking if we want to create a new household or join an existing household, we're now given the options. Consumers should remain in their current household or remove the consumer from their current household and create or join a new household. We want the consumer to remain in their current household, so we're going to leave it set to that, and we're going to click on continue. Do we want to add another household member? I'm going to say no, and I'm going to click continue. I have the green check mark indicating that her admission has been processed and everything is good to go. So now I'm going to go back to the home page, and I'm going to log out of awards because that completes the third part of the 3-part training series. So go back to our website, caresny.org, complete the part 3 data entry quiz. Remember, you must pass with an 80 or higher. And then make sure that you have all of the required paperwork, that you've signed the new user agreement, that your supervisor has completed the new user access request form, and that you have the 3 screenshots of the quizzes that you took, and all of them are at 80% or higher. Send them to me, and I will get you already set up, and you can begin your data entry journey.